Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to another edition of the Powercat Podcast. I am Fitz, flanked by Ryan Gilbert and Coles Carmody. That one never caught on. Gills stuck, Coles didn't. It was a bit too far to try to get four Z's in one podcast. Let's just take a moment of silence for Zach, who's no longer with us. Zach's still live. He's just not on the podcast anymore. Ryan Gilbert's back from a really fun 5-day basketball tour of Fort Worth and then Stillwater. He turned into a bus. I had to start hauling around the guys who were the big buck guys who flew down, and so he became their transportation because they couldn't get home. You're a saint, Ryan Gilbert, to let the competition and Kellis into your car, which was my car. Did you put the dog stuff up, or did you make like Kellis lay in it like he's a dog?
They alternated who was in the back seat, but I was kind enough to tear down Dude and Daphne's dog seat. But there was a question. I didn't include this, but one of the questions in the thread was, does Gills get hazard pay? And I think I should, Fitz, after that trip.
Not because of the snow. You're not talking about the snow that you didn't have to deal with. It has everything to do with the things that you saw happen.
It was a different weather phenomenon known as suckage. A lot of that broke out in the Southwest this weekend and into the week. Be careful with all the suckage. It's sucked here and put snow up there and just left L's littered all over greater Oklahoma, Texas area. That's it for the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. I really, guys, I'm looking forward to these questions because I don't know what we're going to, here's your questions from Wabash Station. We appreciate you watching. Make sure you're subscribing to the site. Hey, by the way, I haven't said this literally in years. If you're listening on Apple and you're still the podcast guy or gal that wants to just listen and you don't want to see these beautiful faces and gills, you just want the words to tickle your brain through your ears and no visuals. I get that. But if you enjoy the podcast, leave us a 5-star review. That helps us. The algorithm, I always talk about the YouTube algorithm. That's that algorithm. Do that. And if you think it's 4 stars or less, shut the hell up. Here's your questions from Wabash Station. Gills, what do we got?
First half is basketball, second half football.
Okay, we're going to do about 5 minutes of first half, and then we'll do the rest. We'll get in the rest of the hour. Here's Ryan Gilbert.
From B. Foster, 1959, for the struggles that we have, is it a low basketball IQ, poor effort, lack of talent, or bad coaching?
Do we have to pick one? I think it's a little bit of everything. I genuinely think, based on what Coleman Hawkins said, these guys just aren't into it. They got their money. They think they've accomplished something, and now they're just kind of cruising. I don't think the coaches are doing a great job. There's no way. And there's no energy to go with a lack of passion. You can fake the energy. It's a mess. I've never seen anything quite like it. These guys act like they literally don't like each other. And I don't know about you guys. And Cole, I know this is going to be true because you were a football player and some real jerks can be football players. I didn't like teammates all the time. But when we were on the court, we were buddies.
Yeah.
You leave that crap off the court. And if this generation is not going to do that, and I've seen it in the NBA too, screw you, man. That's your problem. So if they don't like each other, then you get the hell over it and start having some pride in their product. Because, okay, you got a bag of money. You are absolutely destroying your potential for professional basketball. I mean, if let's say Doug McDaniel wanted to go to the NBA, this stuff's going to follow you. What's going on? You've played a little bit better, but it's going to follow you into Europe. Nobody wants a disruptor onto their roster. Get along, play some ball. This is gross. This is the most sickening basketball product I've seen. And I've covered Jim Wooldridge, whose team could not finish a game for the life of them, and Tom Asbury, whose teams were so bad his wife set his clothes on fire in the front yard. That may not have been related to the actual team, but it was about the opposition scoring with her husband. But anyhow, that's my thoughts.
So here's my take on this, guys. It's a sad, to be quite frank. It's sad, and you guys know I'm not someone who likes to sit up here and call out performances. That's not something that I typically do, and I'm not going to call out individual players, but I will tell you, it makes me appreciate Coleman Hawkins. It makes me appreciate David Gasson, because when Coleman Hawkins got up on the podium after the Drake game and said, it's going to be the world versus us versus the world, however you put that, I took it as that was what the locker room was. That was the attitude the locker room was going to have. And I think my biggest mistake with that, guys, was assuming that those guys would take an attitude. Those guys don't have an attitude. David Gasson, Coleman Hawkins, those guys have an attitude. They want to win. They play hard. They play for one another. If you watch Coleman Hawkins play the game of basketball, he plays the game of basketball like a connected teammate. The problem is his teammates aren't playing like that.
No.
And so that's what gets me so frustrated, guys, is because I have gained so much respect for Coleman Hawkins. It took me a while before you could finally kind of start to see the light when it comes to him. But this is a kid who cares. He cares about K-State. I truly believe that. He cares about K-State. He cares about this program. He cares about the coaching staff. But it seems like right now, David Gasson is the only other one who plays like it. I'm not saying that other guys don't care about it, but he's the only one who's showing that he does on the court at this very moment in time.
Hold on, Gills. Let me pick up on the Coleman Hawkins thing. I was pretty hard on him early in the season, kind of calling him out because I didn't like his effort. He did a lot of standing around and trying to pass and just kind of hanged out on the perimeter and didn't use his height right. And he has come to life. And Jerome Tang and his coaches were seeing it too, that they had to tell him, you got to be the lead scorer. You got to be the dude. You're a great passer. You love to pass, but that's got to come second. You need to look to score whenever possible. He's done that. He's bought into the energy. He's bought into better defense. He seems to really care. But there's just other guys on this team that clearly just aren't invested. They don't have energy. They don't. I can't explain it. I think it says a lot about their competitive spirit. I mean, there's some people that if you're going to walk to the car, they want to win, and these guys want to be picked up. And it's just it's disturbing to watch. But I do got to say, I agree with Cole. Coleman Hawkins has turned into one of my favorite athletes I've covered. He's highly intelligent. I don't know where his basketball career is going to go, but he's going to be an analyst. Someone would hire him tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Incredibly bright, knowledgeable of the game, and he's got an old spirit to him, which might make it hard for him to actually be the leader of a group of guys. I go back to when they had the unveiling of the new uniforms and the guys were dancing in the locker room, and Coleman's in the background looking like the dad, like crazy kids. And I just think that video for me summed him up quite a bit. He's a very mature individual. Okay, Gilson.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, pretty much nailed it on the head. Coleman Hawkins is not going to say what he said post-game after Oklahoma State if he wasn't frustrated, if he wasn't trying to be a leader, if he wasn't bought in, right? So in Tang's words, buy-in, that's kind of what he said all season. That's the clear and obvious answer for this question, buy-in. And maybe you can blame coaching for the guys they got from the portal. Maybe they should have done more homework or what have you. Maybe that falls on the coaches at the end of the day, but it's really a buy-in and effort. And when you're in January, I mentioned this in the post-game talk, when you're in January and you are still having these conversations in the press conference about coming out of the locker room or going through pregame warm-ups and kind of just going through the motions, Coleman Hawkins said it best. The basketball gods aren't going to reward you for a lack of effort. They're just not. So that's by far and away, I've been to pretty much every game, this year. That's the biggest thing is and it's not something that's super glaring, in every possession or every player, but when it's constantly getting brought up and you have a team that is talented and you have a coaching staff that's been to an Elite Eight, say what you want about Noel and Johnson, but they've been to an Elite Eight. They've got talented players on this team. Answer is pretty simple, that it's buy-in.
Agreed. Hey, look, I don't know if this is an indictment on the NIL process or the evaluation process of this coaching staff. Maybe both. But, I mean, we knew Doug had a history to him, and they're trying to get him on track. It's kind of a battle of wills. They just need him to play, man. They need everyone to pick it up. And I don't get the lack of spirit, the lack of enthusiasm to play a game you supposedly love, to compete. You lost to Oklahoma State in front of 1,500 fans, Gills.
Maybe, if even at that.
They're out totally on basketball. They're done. And Kansas State fans will show up in far greater numbers. No matter how this season goes, if it totally tanks, there will be more fans at the games in March than were at Oklahoma State last night.
Yep.
This is someone posted a video of Frank talking about the fans, and Hugs love the fans. You know, Bruce once in a while would mention the fans. The fans at Kansas State are amazing, and they deserve much better than this. They really do.
And you brought up Frank. I'm just going to point over my right shoulder, fellas. I have a picture of Frank Martin. I got that a long time ago and managed to keep it in pretty good shape. I decided it would go up in my studio just as kind of a reminder. You know what? There's a way to go about handling your business on the basketball court, in life. And you go about handling your business and you do your business. That's what Frank was all about. And right now, these guys are really not handling their business.
Cole, why is my picture on your wall?
That's pretty good.
We had a lot of questions about offense in the 5-out. So I just picked one from KSU, NorCal. Can someone explain the 5-out offense and why it's not working? What can and will be done?
It does. It has worked. It doesn't work when you stand around and stare at each other and pass the ball. You got to move. I do a Wednesday hit every Wednesday, 4:35 usually on WIBW radio. And the whole crew there does a great job. Dan Lucero was hosting today. I think the world of Dan. He asked me one of the best questions I've ever been asked on talk radio. One of those questions, you guys do radio now too, and you do podcasts. And let's be honest here. You can answer almost any question when someone, unless it's an unfair question or poorly phrased, you can mechanically answer the question if needed be. He asked me, what identity is Jerome Tang's teams trying to play to on both ends of the court? Now let's dive into that. The first year you had Marquise Noel. You had a acrobat who was really fast, handled the ball, distributed the ball, shot the ball, and your team played at a high speed because he could initiate that. That seems like a pretty good product. It was effective. Seems like a good way to do things. But then they come back, and for 2 years in a row, they've taken a guard who isn't a true point and try to make him a point. When he had success with not a true point, a born to be a point guard guy. That you saw the success of what having a fast, natural point guard who can create. And they try to match the scoring part of that instead of the ball handling part of that and the creation part of that. You can compensate for the scoring with someone else. You can't compensate for the leadership and creation of a true point guard. So right there, I don't know what they're trying to accomplish on offense. I don't. And defensively, they were good, and they're just not as good. And honestly, I don't know what's going on. But my theory on this is there's one player. Well, now we talked about Coleman. There's two players you can't take off the court right now. You need Coleman Hawkins out there, but most of all, you need David Gasson out there because that guy is busting his ass for every second he's on the court. But honestly, his game's flawed. He leaves you weak in the middle. He's not a great defender at times because of his size. He does a great job of rebounding, but it doesn't seem like K-State's able to stop the follows. That when they get a rebound, they score. K-State gets a rebound, they struggle with that. And so you've got two guys that took a pretty good chunk of NIL money, post players with great upside, just sitting over there watching. Might as well get him popcorn like he's Bill Walker and they're bored over there just eating the popcorn. Might as well go for that because they've got this true post talent just sitting over there because they literally can't take Gasson off the floor. What does that tell everyone else? This guy's busting his ass, but we're going to take him out. We're going to play someone else. So they're in a real conundrum right now with this team. And it was a great question because I don't know what they're trying to accomplish with this offense. When they move and pass and have energy, it works. We've seen it do that. But they're not doing that. They're not consistently. If they had done that the whole game at TCU, they would have won by easily. I'm not going to say double digits, but it wouldn't have been a one-possession game. And they didn't do hardly any of it at Oklahoma State. They acted like they just simply didn't care. Maybe they felt like the TCU game was a must-win. Maybe that was the thought in the locker room. But they didn't win, and then they turned it into 2 losses.
In order for the 5-out to be successful, guys, you have to pass the basketball. And how many times would the game in Stillwater where it felt like there was a guy who was back cutting who was open? And if that guy who possesses the ball at that moment throws the ball to the cutter who's cutting to the basket and hits him in the hands, he's going to have a layup. There was multiple times where that happened. And we talked about this with Missy Heydrich on the K-State Insiders. Cut with a purpose. I mean, you got guys that are just running in the lane and not even looking for the ball. It's like, I know this is probably not what's going on, but it's like the guys who don't have the ball are mad that they don't have the ball.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're frustrated that they don't have the ball and that they're not the ones who are going to go score. And it's strange because K-State does a really good job of assisting each other. Like you look at the stats and they're really good on offense when they assist, but that's what the 5-out lends to is because you get those mismatches, you get those easier opportunities for baskets at the rim. And so naturally you're going to have an assist if you throw the ball to a cutting guy who just catches the ball and puts it in the hole for a layup. So do that more. Like I struggle with that because I don't necessarily think it's the offense's fault. I just don't think that either they haven't been coached to do the right things, which is very possible in that offense, or they just simply aren't executing. And you know what, guys? We'll never know because no coach is going to come out and say, we didn't coach him correctly. And no coach is also going to come out and say, we're just not very good. We're never going to know. We're never going to know what the real reason is. But from an outsider's perspective, it just sure looks like some selfish basketball is being played.
Yep, and that kind of ties back into buy-in. And the 5-out offense and all that, like, could it be better? Yes. Could K-State's staff be better? Yes. But people need to understand and realize that Tang won a national championship at Baylor. Uric Malagy was on multiple Big 12 schools before he came to K-State as an assistant, right? Mo Can's a very good, or Rodney Perry and his he was at Link?
Yeah.
And then he went I'm sorry, I blanked out on that. But like these guys know basketball, right? And so it really does tie back into buy-in. When there's not buy-in, I can't stop saying that word, but when that's not there, boy, it's tough. And I think my answer to the 5-out would be there's just not enough guys that are necessarily catered to it. Coleman Hawkins is 100% a versatile player. You want to have guys just going out there and just kind of balling, just kind of playing and can score on their own, right? Coleman can do that. I think Gasson's kind of versatile in that regard. And there's guys that can kind of pitch in their own ways, but I just don't know if this roster is the best for a 5-out system. But, guys, I don't know what me and Clint Stewart are going to do to fill the time on our shoot around on Friday. And I think this is something that I would love to dive into with him. Us three, I think we know basketball pretty well, but as a player and coach, I'm sure Clint can offer some good insight onto this. So tune into that if you're watching right now.
Hey, look, I don't know if Clint would be into this, but I think it's a great idea. It's called the shoot around. So what if you guys took shots throughout
While we
the
do the
show?
show, are you going to
Yeah.
permit that? All right. Don't tell me twice.
I don't know. It's not like anyone's going to watch it.
But we're not doing the walk. We're not walking when we do the Friday walkthrough. I'm just letting you know we're not.
So many
no
shots,
exercise
we won't be able to get up. No walking allowed.
The women are off to a fast start, fellas. I keep glancing over here in the studio. The women are coming to the end of the first quarter and ahead 20-7.
They're making shots.
They're making shots. And
bourbon's not technically a shot, but I learned on this trip that Derek and Kellis enjoy bourbon.
Okay.
yes, I do. Yes.
I stuck with Corona Light or Corona Extra.
Like a real man. Next
From
question.
TN Cat, can we expect anyone from this year's roster to return next year after this debacle?
Really?
That's a tough. You can't ask that question.
I have no idea.
That's why we get paid the big bucks. We have to answer these questions.
They can't maintain a program trying to pick up 10 new guys a year.
No.
They just can't. You got to have a better foundation than that. They have to reinvent their team every stinking year. They don't bring back enough, and they don't bring back enough players that will guide the new guys. I mean, when you're outnumbered 10-3 as opposed to even 7-6, you got a chance there to. Now this is how we do it. They coach each other, and to know what it takes to succeed within the program. I don't get it. I mean, it's going to be tough there. And let's be blunt. I don't know who the basketball NIL donors are. We all suspect we do know, at least some of them. I don't see them going back and doing this again. You don't get to your point in life where you've made so much money you can donate millions to your alma mater and watch it actually get worse because of your investment. So I would imagine most of that NIL money is going to evaporate pretty quickly. And I think we can all agree is if this is what you get for that level of NIL, let's use it on something else. I mean, you can be this bad for free. That I would argue that if you took Drake's roster and paid it 0 cents, you would be a better team. That's how bad this one's gone off the rails.
So there are 3 seniors that are listed here, guys. I don't see any way possible where you have only 3 guys that leave this program at the end of the season. I don't see that.
Well, this is
don't
both
see that.
players. Both post players aren't sticking around. One might. I don't know. Guys, I have no idea. But I mean, I'm sure Hausen. Did I get it right?
Nope.
Hausen. Goodness, Fitz.
Hausen will stick around.
I think David Castillo, I mean, assuming that he can find a way to get into the rotation, which at some point, I mean, I don't know if that's a question, Gills, but at some point you're going to want to see what you got. You're going to want to see what you have in him so you can make a decision. But like people forget that when you recruit high school kids, that relationship is years long. I mean, David Castillo's only been in the program for 1 year, but Gilbert, correct me if I'm wrong, he's had a relationship with Jerome Tang since he was like a freshman in high school. So, I mean,
he was also a Weber recruit. So K-State, Clint, Stewart,
right.
all that stuff.
So I think that's a guy that you want to keep around. I think McCaleb Rich is another one of those guys. I know that there are times where he's not totally locked in, but I think he's starting to figure it out. Like you saw his high school tape and you knew that he was going to kind of be a project, but like, that's okay. Like, I think we forget that there is time to develop people in college basketball. If you can get 2 high-level years out of McCaleb Rich as a junior and a senior, you're doing good. Like, I think you'll take that. And so, like, I think David Castillo and McCaleb Rich are 2 guys that I'm 100% looking at as sticking around. I like the things that CJ Jones brings to this roster off the bench. I think he's actually been pretty solid when he's not asked to be the guy. But, you keep looking down like, okay, are you going to be able to upgrade over a Moby Ike Garuka? Or, like, do you want to keep him here? Like, it's just a matter of what is the value of bringing in a brand new team versus trying to squeeze as much lemonade out of you can out of these guys. And Fitz, you talked about this earlier, but there's a saying in Moneyball, you're not trying to replace what you lost. You're trying to fill in the gaps with multiple people. And so as to, you talk about Marquise Noel, you can't go out and find another Marquise Noel. Just like you can't go out and find another Jason Giambi like they talk about in that movie. You have to bring multiple guys in to supplement that, and we'll see what they decide to do. But there's definitely a core of guys that I would like to see stay. We'll see what happens.
You know what? It struck me when I was talking about this earlier on radio, in that the two most successful in terms of overall season into the postseason K-State teams in recent memory would be that team from 2 years ago with a little point guard who's faster than hell, shoots the ball from deep and distributes. And of course, then the Frank Martin team that went to the Elite Eight with Denny Clemente, a little guard that goes fast as hell. And maybe there's something there. I've often said Bruce's downfall was the fact that he wouldn't embrace going fast and getting up and down the court. His team was so bad in the half court. Why not try to beat the defense? And it looks like that's what Oklahoma State's going to be doing with their new program. And I just think it's a good formula. You can slow it down when you need to, but be aggressive, attack. And I think that helps you even when you're in a half court offense. If you're in that attack mentality, you're going at the rim, whether you're in the open court or against the defense. I don't know. It seems like been a pretty good formula, and maybe pay a little attention to it.
I mean, they scored 100 and something points back-to-back nights against Texas and Baylor, Tank's first year.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. It was impressive. That was a fun team to watch. This is not fun. It's not fun. And I don't think it's talent. I mean, I think it might be specific players like Marquise and Keontae, but overall talent, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But you had guys like Desi Sills playing to a role. Does anyone seem to know their role? I mean, Housen does. I mean, he knows whatever. He knows his role. He just can't fulfill it right now.
I think David Gasson, to answer your question.
Yeah.
I think David knows his role.
I agree. He knows his role. He knows what they need from him. He's
Yeah.
not capable of doing all the things they need from a post player, but he does everything else extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I think Coleman Hawkins is picking it up, but I don't know. I bet you if you ask CJ or Max Jones, I don't know. Doug's trying to be the point guard. His role involved, getting to the rim and shooting and falling down, trying to get to the rim. Because he just hasn't handled the ball that way throughout his career. It's very frustrating. I would like anyone else to attempt to talk about this for 30 minutes, which is what we're coming up on, because it's maddening.
And we got one more question.
Just bring it home.
From Gillum fan, 67663. Tang is all about consistency and wanting the same efforts and performance from each player night in and night out, instead of 2 points one night and 14 the next. But is this coaching staff just as guilty, from the game itself to the rotation and minutes of players?
That's hard to compare. I see what you're saying, asking with that. I think he's getting pretty consistent effort. It's crappy effort, but it's consistent. Again, it's no one group's fault. The players got to own this. The coaches got to own this. And I've got to own what I'm responsible for, was actually believing they were going to be better than I don't want to say better than they are. That doesn't say much. That they were going to be upper half of this conference. I was wildly wrong. They're going to be scratching for wins to stay out of the cellar. And all the time acting like they don't care. Unless they fix it. Yeah, cool.
It's hard right now for this coaching staff, I can imagine, because this coaching staff is built on love, right? Like, let's just call it how it is. They are not the kind of coaching staff to tear down people unless they're meant to build them back up. When Jerome Tang talks about his relationship with Doug McDaniel, he's being so incredibly vulnerable and honest, because he's doing it because I truly believe he genuinely loves and cares about Doug McDaniel. but that's part of the struggle. And again, I know it's so easy to talk about the coaching staff, and I think they deserve some blame in what's going on. There's 100%, but they're a team. It's a team. The coaches, the players, everybody involved. It's not just the head coach. It's not just the defensive coach. It's not just the offensive coach. It's not just the point guard. Everybody is involved in this. And so to answer the question from Gillum fan, yeah, I do think the coaching staff, they are inconsistent with the way they use guys. Ugano and Yenso didn't play a single minute in the first half against Oklahoma State. I tweeted something about at halftime. It sure would be nice to see one of your 2 7-foot centers who you're paying a lot of money go up against a guy who's just absolutely kicking your ass. And guess what they did? Ugano and Yenso didn't come out of the second half one time. He didn't necessarily play amazing, but he didn't play bad. And that's the first time he'd played in games. And so, yeah, I understand how that can be hard for the players. But at some point, screw that, man. From a player's perspective, when your name is called, you got to be ready to go. And credit to Onyenso, I thought he was, but it's just there's no blame on just one group. It's a whole entire team problem.
Yeah.
Agreed.
The thing with Onyenso is the way he performed is neither here nor there. It was a change in the middle of a game to go to a zone and get a bigger lineup. And that, that's a completely different, rotation. Everything was different in the second half. And so this is a very fair question from Gillum fan. Okay, why was that not the plan all along? Or why did they go to it in the first place? Right. That's not consistency. That's inconsistency from the first half to the second half. And so I get the question, that is certainly valid. Pregame, should that have been something because what was that dude, Abu? He had like 15 points in the first half for Oklahoma State. That should have been maybe something that was glaring on the scouting report that David Gasson or Hawkins it wasn't going to be a good matchup down low.
Man. Let me just say a couple things. Before we go to break, let me wrap up basketball with these thoughts. I know what he wanted to do with his own. I mean, he wanted to change the nature of the game, and that's fine. Sure. I have no problem with it.
Me neither.
But as the second half progressed and you started to make those little runs, you can't allow your opposition to just sit there and run out the clock. Time's your enemy as much as the score. You need more time and more points, and you're not getting that when you're sitting in a zone. So I thought they needed to get out of it at some point because, frankly, it looked like Ron Prince coaching. I'm not coaching to win right now. I'm managing the size of the loss. I'm not comfortable with that. But I'm really not comfortable with some of the personal attacks I'm seeing. I've not hidden the fact that I think a lot of Jerome Tang. This man is not a phony. He is what he is. He might be too emotional. He's got flaws, but he's not a con man. He's not stealing money from Kansas State. He wants to win as much as anyone else. And so do these coaches. Now the question becomes, are they equipped to make that happen? That's something that their boss, Gene Taylor, is going to have to answer. So, but this staff isn't like a bunch of rotten apples. It's not. And the man in the main chair is a really good person. You might want to question his coaching, like I just did, but don't question his intentions. He wants to win. He wants this to be a great program. I just don't think I think he's in gridlock in his head. I don't know what button to push. And that honestly is probably a lack of experience as the decision maker, not just the head coach, but the decision maker. The guy who says, because a lot of coaches have that. Coach, let's get into this. And maybe that's something they need to look at. I don't know. That's the first half of the Powercat Podcast. We're sponsored by no one because no one loves us except you, listeners and viewers, and my dogs who are in here, and those guys. We'll be back. Cole, get ready. I'm about to blow your mind.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors. Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
I fixed it, Cole.
It works.
Welcome back to the Powercat Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't know if YouTube's parking breaks in there. We do that for the podcast side. We're contracted to do so many breaks, so many ad placements, I guess is what it is. So that's for the podcast version. We just covered basketball. I assume this is about football. We got women's basketball going on. It's at break right now, but they're kicking the crap out of a very good Utah team in the first half. That's nice to know. Something's going right. And Cole, by the way, while you were out doing something personal, something that we never thought would happen, honestly.
I got my tires changed. Everyone watching, I needed to replace my tires. And of course, I'm going to just take this story from Fitz. K-State gets a commitment while I'm getting my tires changed. Of course, I don't have my computer on me. So by the time you're watching this, the story will be up, but I was getting my tires changed. So,
yeah,
Gil's never got that type of privacy on the podcast when he was getting his tires changed.
Your story actually involved rubber, though. So on with the questions from Wabash Station. Ryan Gilbert, take it away. Please take it away. Don't let me talk anymore.
From Pickles, now that the 2025 football roster seems to be mostly settled, how does it compare to some of K-State's better teams? How many of these players would start for the 98, 03, 12, or 22 team?
Ooh, Pickles. Woo.
Jeez.
Woo. That's a level of evaluation I haven't achieved yet. But luckily, I got a guy on this podcast who's been following all of the incoming transfer portal guys. Cole, how do you feel about this group, and how does it improve the team for 25?
So I'm going to not compare it to 2022, 2012, what do you say, 03 and 98. I will compare it to last year's team, though. And right now, I think they are incredibly further along than they were last year at this point in the season. If you were to strictly look at the guys who left and the guys they brought in, I think the guys that they brought in are better than the guys that left. And that's nothing against the Brendan Motts. That's nothing against the Austin Moores. I'm just talking about as a collective, the guys that they've brought in are better than the guys that left. And so naturally, if you're not even talking about progression with players, I mean, first of all, guys, the roster retention was incredible. Can we talk about that? Like, holy smokes, for the stuff that we talked about during the season. And, you know, I thought we would see a few more players enter the portal. The fact that we didn't, that in and of itself is a portal victory. It really didn't matter how many huge names this program got because they were able to keep their big ones.
I thought it was interesting that at the end of the day, they have to get down to 105. So most of the guys that went into the portal off this roster didn't go into the portal on their own. They were told, we won't have a spot for you. And that was legislated. You can't do anything about it. It's cold hearted, but that's where we're at in college athletics. If you're going to get paid, you're going to get laid off. And I think this team's better for it. Yeah. I think you can say they didn't replace Brendan Mott, but they got better overall as a team. I mean, they've got a good local player coming in. But again, for me, the evaluation isn't just what are you going to bring next season? It's for some of these guys is, okay, you've got a longer shelf life. And that's going to be kind of where I start with my second Deep Purple on Avery Johnson. You know, fans can react now and say, well, they should have picked Will. I still don't agree with it. I don't. I think what Will did was best for Will, but for Kansas State, having a young quarterback that can play 2-3 years, I think it's huge. And I'll be comparing Will's 2023 stats with Avery's 24 stats. I expect Will's probably to be better. I haven't looked at him. I mean, I had Will's up there, but I think you can argue that Avery had a really good season for a sophomore quarterback at Kansas State. And that hasn't happened very often. It wasn't perfect. We all saw that, but it wasn't bad. And I think some of you need to adjust your scope a little bit. If Avery had gone into the portal, he was going to get paid a lot of money, but he wants to be in Manhattan. He wants to be at K-State, and he wants to play for Chris Kleiman. I think need to respect that a little bit.
Gilbert, before you weigh in on this, I'm going to say this because you brought it up, Fitz. Avery Johnson would start at Ohio State too. Like, do we agree with that?
Yeah.
Like, if Avery Johnson would have gone on the transfer portal and Ohio State would have had the opportunity to get Avery Johnson, I think he could be the starting quarterback at Ohio State and be maybe not just as good as Will Howard, but there's no reason why Ohio State wouldn't be in the same position. If Avery played the way he played this year for K-State and played like that for Ohio State, they would be in the same position. And that's not a knock on Will Howard. I think that just tells you how good Avery Johnson is, because Will Howard is a really damn good quarterback. We've known this. We saw him play in 2022. We saw him excel in 2023. He's a good quarterback. Well, Avery Johnson's a really good quarterback. And when you take that progression, again, if you have a good head coach and you have a good quarterback, Gilbert, you know where I'm going with this, you're going to be successful in the NFL. Well, this isn't the NFL, but K-State has a pretty good head coach, and they're developing a really good quarterback that I think is going to take the next step. So all your points are valid, Fitz.
I think Will Howard's decision has worked out so well. If you haven't watched the Deep Purple yet, and it's a 20-minute commitment, I get it. There's a text version that's massive for our VIP customers. Will's even talking about Kansas State after the Rose Bowl. Will's talking about, I wish I'd known that at Kansas State. I wish Chip Kelly, it turned out, has been the perfect coach, position coach and offensive coordinator. I don't know if he's a position coach for Will Howard. He's made him a much better player. He's taught him patience. But Ohio State has, I'm going to use a great word, a plethora of talent. They can do a lot of things offensively, and they stress a defense because of that. And that brings me back to, I think, what most of our frustrations were with the offense in 24 for Kansas State is they had a plethora of weapons that they didn't put on the field together very often. And thus, they didn't stress the defense very often. Why did they keep playing Dylan Edwards? Well, because the defense has to adjust to it. Okay. Build off of that a little bit more. You got to adjust to DJ Giddens. Avery, when he's able to run, and that was a big problem. Jace Brown, we saw them do that at the bowl game. Spread it out, stress the defense, and let your quarterback just distribute. And that's what Will's doing up there. And it's good. I think they're going to win the national title. I really do. Folks, do you think Will Howard's going to have something to say about Texas, playing Texas at the Cotton Bowl? My worry for Will is he goes over the top with his energy level.
That's true.
But I think he's going to be huge in this game. He's got something to say. He now has the players across the board to play physical football. You don't have to, finesse them or whatever, K-State would do or what Arizona State did in their game. You can line up and play with them at Ohio State.
From Third Gen Wildcat, which seems to have risen more, the floor or the ceiling?
Ooh.
Well, we're talking about football, right?
Yep.
Ooh.
I think the fans are pushing the floor up because the pushback I hear from Chris Kleiman's comments about we just won 9 games 2 seasons in a row. This season in wins and losses matched last season. I mean, they ended up getting that extra win in the bowl game and got 9 wins. And I heard a lot of people say, "Oh, that's all we're going for, 9 wins." Jesus, folks, it's hard to win 9 games. It's hard to have a winning record in college football because, in case you didn't know, someone loses every game. But I think they're pushing the floor up, but I think the ceiling, we haven't even found the ceiling. And I come back to the 2023 recruiting class. They lift the ceiling. They do. It's a really special class. And we've seen Joe Jackson now step up out of it. There's so many players that are making a difference on defense and offense. And I think they've raised the ceiling too. I think this team next year and the year after, if Avery's around, has a tremendous amount of potential. And they've got to get the next quarterback ready for next season to be the backup, then to be prepared if Avery does leave. We'll see. it's interesting. I thought the way football ended its regular season, we would not be dealing with many football questions, but they bounce back in a bowl game, and basketball doesn't bounce anywhere. So now here we are talking about the 2025 football season in January.
I thought of this question as a roster question, Fitz, not necessarily as a wins and losses. And so to answer the question, I think that the floor has risen because before, and we've talked about this, part of the reason that K-State has struggled in the past is because they just haven't had the depth, right? They have not had the backup. Somebody gets hurt. Oh, shoot. The next guy who's coming in, you never know, right? Well, they've gone out in the transfer portal and they've addressed those needs. Like, we'll just talk about Jay Sean Ross, man. That is an awesome get. And this is an awesome get because the kid wanted to come to K-State, right? He knew as soon as he entered the portal, he was coming to K-State. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is where he wanted to be. So if K-State wanted him, that's where he wanted to be. That's a guy who was a top 175 recruit in the country as a high school kid last year. Would have played more at Alabama this year had it not been for an injury. And guys, that's a guy who, like, you know what? You're not expecting him to come in and start. You're not, because you have talent already that you've developed that you feel comfortable in. And so a kid like Ross can come in, learn the system, develop, and then become a contributor. And I think that's why the floor has risen, because they've just added quality depth. And people have been very, very adamant about the defensive line. And I know I'm going on a tangent here, Fitz, but it speaks about the depth. K-State was second in the conference in sacks last year and 24th in the nation. And they've arguably gotten better at that position. I know you lose the Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year, but you have some other guys who are going to be ready to step up and replace that production like we were talking about. And so, yeah, I think the floor has risen tremendously, and I would be very surprised if they are not picked in the top 4 in the preseason poll.
Let me build off your point there, because I think you, by the way, K-State leads 31-22 at half, which I don't know why I'm giving live updates like this is a live show, but I just we're plugged into basketball. Unfortunately, our only time to do it was during the game. Do this podcast. Go back a few years ago when they lose Felix, Anudike Uzama. I feel better this season about the guys that are in line to replace Brendan Mott than I felt about Brendan Mott actually replacing King Felix. And he did. He did in every way. He's probably not an NFL defensive end. He may not be an NFL player because he's a tweener, but as a college defensive end, he turned out to be brilliant against the run and the pass. But I feel like they've got enough young guys. You look at Chidi and Toby and Ryan Davis and all these guys. I just left someone out that are going to make tremendous progress into their third season of college football. That's when physically you really start to fill out. And I'm eager to see who steps up, because someone will. Will they be that good? I don't know. But I think as a group, they could be a lot better than the combined forces we've seen along that defensive line.
Yep.
I don't disagree with Cole, anything you said, but the floor for Chris Kleinman's teams, he's proven that that's always going to be pretty high. And so you look at Avery Johnson and Edwards and Brown on offense, and with kind of a year under their belt to still win 9 games and maybe not do it in the prettiest or sexiest fashion. Yeah, I think that the potential for next season, it kind of feels, I know we've talked about this with before this last season, like this was the 2011 to the 2012 coming up, right? And defensively, Austin Romaine, like, okay, this was kind of his time to be a prominent player, but now next year's the true time for him to be a superstar on defense. And so if everybody stays and things start to keep clicking the way they should, I think the ceiling is much, much higher for this team. While we all wanted K-State to win the Big 12, and they had a chance really until November when things went south, the biggest, most important, I know DJ Giddens is gone, but Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson can handle that backfield, in my opinion. So they've got the pieces to have a really special season next year. Not that they didn't this year, but the experience and going through those tough times and the ups and downs is going to really, Will Howard mentioned it on your Deep Purple Fits about not trying to be the star and just letting the game come to you. when you've been through a season as starters, K-State's got a number of them returning, can be a special year next year for Kansas State.
I thought that comment bookended his preseason comment about having to be the hero. Like, I think it was an admission that I never needed to be the hero. I needed to get the ball to guys so they could be the hero.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because he had that at Kansas State. I never understood that comment. He had Deuce Vaughn, for God's sakes, until his final year. But yeah, I think he's realized now that when it's your time, you make the play. And when it's not your time, you let other guys make the play. You trust them to make the play. And granted, I come back to this. Ohio State has elite receiver weapons. He's basically throwing to NFL receivers and showing how good he is at it. But yeah, if you haven't watched the Deep Purple, do so. If you're interested in women's basketball, we had Missy Heidrich on the Insiders on Monday. It's just a few days old. It won't have any information about this Utah game in it, but it was great information. She's brilliant. She's a really impressive basketball analyst, and I'm not going to pigeonhole her saying a women's basketball analyst. She's a basketball analyst, and I was great. We got to have her on more often. We got to tap into that.
Yep.
From Ohio Powercat, and this question was asked before the commitment on Wednesday. Seems like we still need some wide receiver and offensive line help from the portal. Would it have been better to try to keep the players that left?
No, not at tackle. I mean, well, the guy or receiver. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they didn't get the kind of tackle play they wanted this year. They feel like the young guys might be ready, but they need to bring someone in. And I think they've helped themselves at receiver. No, I don't know what to say. Receiver has been a problem for years. They've got to fix this. If talk about floor and ceiling, if you don't fix your receiver room and get it to be much better and much more explosive to match what you've had in the backfield, you're never going to get to the ceiling. You're never going to come close to it. So I think they took a big step in that, and you better have a damn good left tackle. They had a decent one, and they had a right tackle that honestly played worse than he did a year ago. And I think they're ready to hit the reset at both of those positions. And so, you had to address these problems. They're doing a great job addressing issues.
So Brandon Snee, I believe, or Snee, Brandon Snee. I'm still trying to figure out. I need to talk to him to get pronunciation down. We'll have that obviously at the signing day press conference when we go through all the transfers. The Wagner transfer, offensive tackle. Guys, I don't know if you saw the measurables on this kid. First of all, he didn't allow a sack. I don't care what level of football you're playing at. To not allow a sack is pretty damn impressive. And obviously coming from Wagner, it's a FCS school up in New York. But Brandon is quite the large individual, 6'6", 320 pounds. That will play. I don't know if he'll be a left or a right tackle. I would probably think he's going to slide in at right tackle for now as they try to figure out what they want to do with the left tackle position. But that's a really important add. And guys, I don't know if they need anybody else in the portal. Like, they've got their wish list. They got their guys done. Getting Uso back for another year was massive, by the way, because they were really, really in the hunt for some defensive tackles. I think that was going to be pretty pricey because that's just the rate now. But
they're going to have to pay it soon.
Right. The fact that they were able to get Uso and they were able to secure this commitment from Snee is huge. And so I don't know. I don't think they need another receiver, guys. I know that they were in on Malik Benson from Lansing, who now is at Oregon, which he just was at Alabama. Then he went to Florida State, and now he's at Oregon. To me, the pitch would have been, you've done all of those schools already. Why are you going to go try and do it again? Thankfully, I think for K-State, he's going to Oregon and not K-State, because I don't know how you can develop a receiver room when you have guys who have loaded potential for 1 year, but no production, because that's what Malik Benson's been. And so I really like the idea of letting the younger guys battle it out for that fourth receiver spot. So I would be a little surprised. I wouldn't be shocked. Right now, it's just best available. They're going to take some more guys, but there's no more wish lists. There's no more wish lists. There's no more want lists, I should say.
Can I ask you guys a question? If you were the AD at Wagner, would you attempt to get like a endorsement deal, something from, and actually change your nickname, your mascot to the Power Painters? I mean, because the Wagner Power Painters has a rhyme to it because it's real. It's something.
Well, they are the Seahawks. They are the Seahawks.
That's lame.
Tyler
Lockett doesn't play at Wagner.
Second year in a row, Casey's got a transfer from Wagner, but you didn't know that.
No. Who was it this year?
A guy by the name of Justin Wolf, who is now at Western Kentucky.
Who was it again?
Exactly.
Yeah. Gills.
You guys ready for this last question?
Oh, yeah, we are. Ooh, we're pushing time too. Yeah.
From Gillum fan 67663.
Gillum fan. Hi, Hayden.
Can a national championship be won in football at K-State?
No, not in the current environment. Check tomorrow's DD. I'm going to talk about that, or today's DD as you're watching this. That's going to be a topic. And that's what's going on with ESPN and the SEC. They've cooked the books, and they don't want to change the formula. And they've done a brilliant job of it. It's where the downfall of the Big 12 happened, was when we started the playoff, and they started making sure they were in the playoff with two schools as often as possible, and created the persona. If you want to play for the national title, you have to go to these schools. And then they get the best players, and now they've got a repeatable thing for themselves. We're getting the best players. But now the NIL, the transfer portal, and the expansion of the playoff has all changed that. But in the current environment, no. And as we head into the financial uncertainty of rev share with athletes, no. But I think if you continue to open up this playoff and fix it from 12 had a problem, and it wasn't too many teams. That's not it. More football is a solution. I think if you continue to add to that postseason, I think you're going to see some equity come across college football that honestly ESPN and the SEC don't want. ESPN just invested a truckload of money in the SEC, and they want to fix the game in their favor. ESPN would literally destroy college football if it profited them, because they're part of that Disney conglomerate, and they give two craps about anything other than making a buck. So I think this will make it harder on them. The portal has actually made it harder. The NIL is still going to be an issue, but we're now seeing, as K-Staters well know, the NIL doesn't solve all your problems. Sometimes it creates problems you never had. So not in the short term, probably not in my lifetime, but I think some of you are going to see K-State make a run in the playoff during your lifetime, maybe multiple. First step is to do better than this year and gain access to that playoff by getting into the bracket. And unless the Big 12 is bad next year, there will be two Big 12 teams in that bracket.
Agreed.
This year proved the mistake they made. BYU would have been better than probably three of the teams that were in the bracket. Just the way it is.
So I saw a graphic today, Fitz, and it's from a competition not to be named, but it still remains very relevant here. Would you like to guess how many 5-star recruits are on Notre Dame's roster?
Don't have no idea.
There's one.
That doesn't surprise me. Notre Dame, I don't think, gets heavy NIL.
And there's only 3 on Penn State's. Okay. So between those two obviously play each other. There'll be 4 5-star kids. Now, you go down the road to Texas, where Ohio State and Texas will be playing one another. There's 13 at Ohio State and 7 at Texas. So there's a vast difference there. But would it really surprise you if either Penn State or Notre Dame won the national championship? No. I wouldn't either. And so where I'm going with this answer is, again, it's kind of about raising that floor. The biggest difference between K-State and a Notre Dame and a Penn State right now is there's 44 4-star players at Penn State and 38 3-stars. That is a pretty large discrepancy. I would imagine K-State's in the 20 range. On 4-star, if you're counting transfers, they're probably in the 15 to 20 range, and that might be generous. Well, then you look at Notre Dame, and they've got 58 4-star players and 23 3-star players. And again, all these ranking services, they're all about the same. Like, let's just call it how it is. So those numbers would become a little bit different for K-State. So until they can consistently start to recruit that high 3-star, 4-star level kid on a consistent basis, it's going to be very tough for them to win a national championship. Will they be able to make a semifinal? I think they can. If they win the Big 12 championship, they get a bye, they can win that first round game and get to this round. Will they be able to then win the next game? Probably. But could they win a national championship with the current talent that's on the roster? That is the ultimate question.
The issue here is, look, K-State's proven it can compete with developing players, that they've had guys that play like 5 stars that were 2 stars coming out of high school. We've seen that. But there's certain positions where, let's be honest, if you're a 5-star or high 4-star defensive tackle, you're a really freak and a beast. I mean, you can move, you're physical. That's the position that I always come back to. And if K-State ever invests in NIL, that's the position they really need to outside of quarterback. That's the difference between Texas at the start of the game when they're fresh. You can't defeat those tackles. You do eventually, but you just don't have that at Kansas State or right now any Big 12 institution. Gills, you got anything?
No, sir.
That's brilliant. Good comment.
I agree.
Thank you for your work out on the road. I'm glad you didn't have to see the Snowmageddon Part 2 that happened here. Cole, appreciate you. Get busy. The transfer portal's still cooking. Unbelievable. And I'm Fitz, and that has been the Powercat Podcast for this week. We'll be back next week with the Insiders, another edition. And, of course, Ryan Gilbert and Clint Stewart will have the Friday shoot-around in which they apparently will be taking shots. We're going to discuss it after we leave, which we're doing right now. Thank you for watching.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.